Hello, everyone. So, to frame it a little bit, it's not about Next.js. It's everything else. Because I had already somewhere expected that I talk about problems with Next.js. No, that's not the talk, and that's not where I'm expert in. So, if this is the question you have, or if this is the thing you need to ask, then ask Nick for the next presentation to be around Next.js. So, good. Very short introduction about me. I'm working in software development for 30 plus years. One of the jobs I'm doing is this kind of software business assessment. This means clients come to me and ask me if look into their software they have got from their partners, and if the pricing is fine or if the quality is good. And I also do software development and other stuff. So my stack mainly is JavaScript. I deploy on AWS, and React.js is what I've chosen to use for the front end. And most of the stuff I'm built on uses somewhere built in the background. So that's why whatever you see now will be based. Good. Who of you has some kind of understanding about React Server components? Just okay. 50%. Okay, good. Because then I will do a very short introduction about React Server components so that they're all on the same level. Otherwise, it gets hard to understand what comes. I like this image because it immediately shows you what you know when you're not used to React Server components is what you see here in blue. That's very typical components that have been used for the last couple of years. Yeah? And the important part, what you see here too, is it's not possible to have a page with React Server components where the outer stuff is not a React Server component. Yeah? So, and what you see here too is a client component will never have never is allowed to have a React Server component. The technical reasons behind that I won't want to discuss. This is something for a talk by itself. Yeah? But this is some of the rules which come with the server component, and also which creates a lot of problems when you start switching to React Server components. Yeah? So what was the idea going to React Server components? The one thing was reduce a little bit the bundle size on the client. Originally there was 0 bundle size. I haven't seen until now with React Server component, so that's why I switched to reduce the bundle size. It improves the rich data fetching, because until before React Server components, data fetching was not part of the React. This was something you've used fetch and some kind of protocols, either GraphQL or REST or whatever. It was completely open. With React Server components offer you additional, you don't have to replace the stuff you know, an option to move data between front-end, back-end, and back-end to the front-end. And this in a very easy way. And that comes to the next point, is unified full-stack development model. So it targets, compared to the old React, where you could live on the client and have other guys working in the back-end. This targets now people who want to have one language, one framework, working back-end, front-end in one frame. Yeah? And a very important point is, that's why it got a little bit more complicated than some people would like, is they try to avoid this kind of waterfalls and re-renders with this architecture. What is specifically included too is I'm sure you have seen the suspend component for quite some while. With React Server components, this becomes something which you will use much more often. And suspense in this case, which wasn't working in the server-side rendering because there was no need for it with React server-side components, and I will show you an example. It's also working on the server. This means that you can have database calls or calls to APIs on the server which take a long time and still all other parts of the site and the content which is needed for other parts on the site is delivered. And this without opening another, so let's say TCP request or another pipeline to the server. So this improves a lot the performance, the visible performance, and also reduces resources usually blocked on the server. Serialization and hydration, I will show you when we come to the examples, because it's much easier to understand what is React Server Component serialization when you see what is happening than just talking about it. So, why did I look beyond Next.js? One of the reasons I didn't try to adapt Next.js, even in my opinion, currently the biggest and best framework also for React Server Components, is that for a long time it was not often supporting a lot of other deployment targets, specifically AWS. I know there has always been an open source attempt to do this, but if you look there on all these pages, even the newest attempt, you will see they're always a couple of versions behind, and it's always breaking. They always break when something is changing on the Next.js. And I also know that now with the latest version, Next.js has vocal a much stronger commitment to support other platforms, and they have also changed a lot of things, but that's things that have to happen. And I hope it for the whole community and the people who use Next.js, but currently it's still the situation that when you use Next.js, you either have a reduced version which you can use in Node.js or build your own stuff, or you stay with Vercel. I have included this picture, and it's not completely, but if you transfer Next.js to AWS, that's part of the infrastructure you have to set up and run on AWS. Yeah? To get every feature, get part of the features you have with Next.js. This is things currently done by Vercel automatically in the background. That's also why they have this new wording. Everyone knows infrastructure as a code, EOC, and they call it framework as code. So they say the framework should also bring with it the definition of all the services you need to have set up and running in the background. Yeah? So that's also the reason why it's not so funny if you have this running and Vercel doesn't support it and something comes with an upgrade and the whole infrastructure is stuck somewhere in the middle with the problem in your production. Good. So, what kind of features we are looking at to get something somehow similar to Next.js. Yeah? The one thing is what most of us need currently is server-side rendering, and we have seen it. And I support Carmen in this way that the simplest way to get the site up and running and also performant is still server-side static site generation, SSG. So that's also something I usually expect from a framework to bring with me. Then all of us are happy with the developer experience, good performance optimizations, and hopefully some kind of community ecosystems where we can ask if we have for help with problems. And one of the main reasons I've also been looking at other options is deployment which is more flexible than just one company. What are the alternatives I've been looking into? If you know something more, I'm happy to hear. The first one started to come out was Waku. The guy behind Waku, everyone knows Jota, and he has a lot of other very Zustand is from him. So he has been in the open source for the last 10 years, I would say, from the beginning, and he's quite well known for his libraries. And his idea was not to compete with Next.js. He wanted to come up with a minimal React server component framework, what is quite typical for the JavaScript ecosystem, not to have something which covers everything, something which covers the basic, and then everyone can combine with libraries and optimize it for whatever. The React server framework is quite new. That's what I remember from Hungarian guy. He started 3 months ago with the beta version of White 6 and got it working really better than currently Waco. Then the Redwood.js, who knows Redwood.js? Okay, yeah. The interesting thing, Redwood.js is, from my understanding, one of the few frameworks out there which covers nearly, let's say, not every aspect, but covers most of the aspects you usually need when you start up with a company. That's also their focus. Redwood.js, the guy behind this, is one of the founders of GitHub, and when he left GitHub, he got some millions, had enough money, so he's sponsoring this framework. And the interesting thing is actually it's a stack with GraphQL, and comes with everything you expect, from sending emails to authentication and the ORM and everything. And by the switching to React server components, they will remove the requirement for GraphQL, and have also switched already in the version 8 to 1.8. So I think this will be, when they're ready, still they're not ready, that's better. This will be the most complete React server component or React framework currently on the market for someone who really needs something where everything is included and he doesn't have to think about and have to make decisions if you use this out library or this ORM or this database. I have also looked into some other stuff, but this is really experimental. That's twofold, Kotlin on the R19. That's interesting for everyone who would like to understand the code behind this kind of frameworks, because, for example, this project, it's a rough 1,000 lines, so half a day is enough to build your own bun-based React server component something, don't call it framework. It gives you some understanding of the problems you get into. The two you find here on the bottom, I added them because they have been in the last year connected always with the React server components, but they still don't offer them. So many people think they have it, like Remix, but Remix currently is only planning or is working on them, but has not provided anything to try out. So, and 10 stack start. Anyone knows 10 stack start? Okay. So I think everyone knows the 10 stack libraries like React Query and all the other libraries from 10 stack. That's actually to 90% it's the 10 stack router, which is TypeScript and it's a very cool product. And they have combined this with Vinci. Anyone knows Vinci? With X, V-I-X-E? Okay, good. Vinci is the project which powers solid.js stuff and is based on Nitro. And Nitro is everyone who comes from the Vue has a Vue background knows Next. And the Next ecosystem has brought out a lot of libraries, and they have open sourced all their base libraries. And one of their base libraries is Nitro. And Nitro is based on H3. H3 is something similar to, everyone knows Honor. Honor is something no, we're now getting serious. That's JavaScript, sorry. That's okay. But that's 10 stack in too many words, just to say. That's what I was thinking right now. Okay. Let's start with Vacuum. It's just a short overview. It's currently still a White 5 based. Yeah? It supports SSI, SVT, and has static RSC. I will show you what I mean with this, because this is something only I know Vacuum is offering. It's very lightweight and easy to learn. It has built-in file system routing. That's something you have to know. Routing is not a part of the React Server components, but it's without routing you can't use React Server components. Yeah? So, yeah.
Is it allowed to ask a question?
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering, because you mentioned React Router and Remix on the previous slide.
Yeah.
And on a few slides before,
yeah.
You had a few requirements you come up with for such a framework.
Yeah.
While I understand that Remix does not support the React server components, but it literally ticks all your boxes from the requirements you have. So I'm just wondering if you were just specifically looking at React.
I was specifically looking. Okay. This is specifically about React Server components, because it's now.
If you search the docs, you will not find it, because they are committed to, but they already supporting server-side generation since a long time before React Server components were stable. So,
but they still have the problem with the data flow. Yeah. That you need how it's called. When you have form and you send something to the server, to get the data back, you do a reload of let's say of the content, and that's something which React Server tries to fix, which does not work in all the frameworks. But that's the thing, and that's also the reason why they are looking for. And you're right, when you look at 10-stack start, for example, they have also tried already to tick the boxes, but they don't use the React Server component. That's something why React Server components are discussed in the Java ecosystem, either the right way or not the right way, but the discussion in the long run goes about removing the number of round trips you have between sending data to the server and getting the updates back.
Yeah.
Because
I think they recently, I'm deep into Remix, so so they recently launched something called CFetch, and this eliminates this. I think what you mean.
Yeah, that's why they're looking for their own solution, which fits better to their existing libraries. Yeah. So they are built on Honor, which allows to deploy to the edge. They offer streaming, and they have started to provide something like a middleware. You see, deployment targets is quite a good list. Usually, I think BodyKit is the only one on the list most people don't know, because it's quite an exotic place to deploy. But it's the one way to deploy when you need a lot of WebSockets or some kind of chat functionality. That's why it's got popular in the last couple of years. Good. The next one, which is the newest kid on the block, but he started with Light 6, which gave him a lot of less troubles from the beginning. He offers also the SSI, SSG, and what he also offers is, he calls it partial pre-rendering. This means that you can define part of the page as static and other part of the dynamic. So this is not the same thing with islands, but it gives you something like this, which could help a lot to reduce the amount of stuff you deliver to the clients. It has also file system routing. It offers even, beside this file system routing, also normal routing configuration definition, which makes it much more flexible. But this is the same too with Vacuum. It's just a question which kind of, if you take the high level, the low level APIs. What Vacuum currently does not offer is API routes, which is the question what you plan to do. If you need any kind of authentications, you always need API rules for the callbacks, or if you have any kind of webhooks. So not having API rules means with Vacuum that you have to dig into the middleware to catch the routes coming in, so it's not that much fun. React Server is only targeting node-based targets, so they also included the node cluster mode. That's something only interesting for people who need high performance. Node offers this cluster mode, similar one now, and this gives you much higher performance because it uses all the processors on the machine. My test case for these new frameworks is, does one planet matter UI work? With React Server we got it working in less than 2 weeks. With Vaco 80% of runtime is working, Material UI is not working at all currently. And because it's so Node.js based, it does not support non-Node.js extra times. Deployment targets, Vercel is working, AWS Lambda should be working hopefully in the next couple of weeks with SDS. They were waiting for SDS to include it.
What is
SDS?
SST?
SST, sorry, SST. Everyone knows, who knows SST? That's getting, okay. SST is in the AWS world one of the ways to deploy to AWS. It's kind of infrastructure of code. The thing is, here is not talking about the old version, it's the new version, which uses Terraform under the hood. So it also supports, for example, Host Europe and other stuff, as really fancy other stuff to deploy. But still depends on what if you have enough knowledge about the infrastructure. So then Redwood should be, I haven't found it, but they say they are V6 based with they also offer SSI, SSG, they have API routes, and I've just started with a list, but that's what I've talked in the beginning. They try to cover everything you need out of the box without deciding what kind of flavor you need to take comes with them. So even Storybook is already clear. So when you set up Redwood.js, you get a full starter package with documentation, everything from the same vendor, and there's a lot of money behind. So we are interested to fix. And they target startups or companies just starting with a project. Deployment targets. Also the usual, the interesting thing is AWS is only supported via deployment platforms, which is not my preferred way to go to AWS. So, this means you have to pay someone else and give someone else your keys so that they can deploy your stuff to AWS. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, but it gets simpler. I've tried to come up with a conversion of the stuff. Next.js is based on TurboPack, at least the latest version. So they fixed a lot of performance problems with that. Everyone else is based on Vite. The rendering is similar. There's something specific for React Server. They support micro frontends. Everyone who knows what is a micro frontend? Micro frontends is a way where you connect independent front ends together on one page. Yeah? And in this case, you have a React component where you can include in a page a remote React component with a URL. So it's a very fancy way to make a frontend, but it makes a lot of sense if you have big teams or which want to make independent have an independent development, and everything should come together on a React level. That's the thing, not on a HTML level, because a lot of micro frontends are based on server components or HTML components, so they can share with some context, but not as easy as when they are completely React. Deployment targets we've talked before. I've also added the community size because in the end of the day, everyone will have a problem with some stuff, and this immediately shows it currently doesn't make any sense to do for a bigger company to switch away from Next.js. There is no, and also the last row I've added because without a financial background, usually there's always the risk that the project just stops tomorrow. And even big projects like Gatsby, which had a really hype, are now dying or are dead already.
So it means it doesn't matter.
Huh? This is it. I mean, as long as he stays behind, and as I know, he still stays behind this project. Yeah, there is no. This is still the best project currently because there is no company behind. They don't have to pay. They have no investors. They have to pay out. There's just one guy. Yeah.
How is Reddit trying to make money? At some point, I guess we want to make money with something. So maybe not.
I think if you are a startup, you can apply them and they will pay you to use the
Yeah. He pays.
Yeah, okay, but
No, he will invest in startups. I'm sure he picks out the startups he's interested in. That's the usual way. This kind of people who have.
I think I understand he's not a millionaire but a billionaire.
Yeah.
And so these problems kind of become a bit irrelevant.
but you understand, when you look at this row, this project is best financed. No discussion about investors. No, what kind of so.
So it's like you have to pay for lunch every day, and he's like, oh God, another 50 developers every day.
It's like playing tennis or something.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry about that. So let's try this because I think I need to go back to share. So, let's switch to my Google profile.
1.2 billion.
Nice.
1.2 billion.
Yeah. But I'm still sure he invests in some of the
Yeah, so he does that. I mean, he owns a full office space in Berlin just for fun.
Who doesn't?
How do you have fun? I don't.
So, is it big enough for you?
no.
Can make it a little bit smaller. Is it okay now? Still okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Very interesting syntax.
Okay, that's the stuff. Yeah, that's what it. So the first small app I show you is a typical to-do app. So actually, I've started always with a template which was built for Next.js. So I show you the to-do app, the structure, how it is for Next.js. So you have everyone knows a page component for Next.js. Then the page component has the add to do, and then the to-do list component. That's very easy. So,
But you should mention this is a server component now because you have
Yeah.
to wait.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you. So the page itself is already a server component. That's very important. So that's also the reason why you have async, and you can do something like loading the to-dos from the database. You have the to-do list, which is a server component, because there is no local state, so it can be both client and server. And we have here the to-do item, and what you see here is use client on the top, and this is the thing where it starts to become different to what you're used to with the components you've built for React. Yeah? This component is still the way there's something like you're used to, but when you want to use kind of state and hooks, you need to define them as use client.
You only have to set the boundary once, and every child then implicitly inherits.
As long as you don't make them imported.
Yeah.
You're right, as long as you make your components not to be exported everywhere, because then you should have it already. It's better usually when you're not sure where the component gets imported, then always you have always to put use client on top if you have any kind of state. If this component is like the list this way, then you don't have to do anything, because then it's used on the client, it's used to the server, and as long as there is no state, it works. But in the moment you add any kind of hooks or state, like in the to-do, you need to define it as use client, and Nick is right. It wouldn't be necessary if there is a sub-component or sub-component, but in the moment the sub-component can be imported individually to somewhere else, at another place. Yeah? You will get into trouble if someone just imports this without thinking, because then he needs to wrap it around, write a wrapper with use client to use this. Yeah? This is something you will run into a lot when you use some libraries which are not, some UI libraries which have not been ported to support React Server components. This means for all the components they offer, you need to write a wrapper to get them working. Yeah? So, in this case, write something to the library out to, because it's much easier for them to change this thing. Good. Any questions to this code? Because I think it's very simple and nothing special to the items itself. The form is the same, and where it becomes different is when you look at the form, you see this is the wrong. Let's go to the implemented stuff in the Vacuum, then I can, because there is, it's fine, it's okay, because this is running. So in the form, that's the right form. Okay. So what you see is a form as you know it. It's just an input field and a button. Normally, when you have a button, you have you somehow have a function on the submit the form, and in the submit handler usually you call some kind of backend API. And the big difference here is because we are working with React Server components and server-side actions, you now can call a function like this here, and this function will be called the server. And the only thing you need to do to make this function not be running on the client is to ensure that the function itself, we go there, this is indeed for this one, is in a file with use server on the top. That's one version. There are other versions where you can write use server in the function itself here. On this place would also work. You can even move this function to the file we have already seen before, and it still does not, will be removed to the client side and only exists on the server.
Which is terrible because it introduces a lot of problems.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Always keep it in a separate file. If you have it in, if you ever inline a server action, you're opening up for a lot of trouble.
So when you leave it there, as Nick said, you should have a huge knowledge about JavaScript enclosures and context.
Yes.
Yeah? And if you have that, you will have
I think this should be. So Next.js, to avoid crazy bugs or security leaks, Next.js will encrypt your on-ver-cell, encrypt your JavaScript context if you use it, if you if you have a variable in the render function that you use in the server action, you will actually encrypt that variable, send it down to the client, and then send it to the server action again, the encrypted chunk, and decrypt it there, and then use it. And so if you have something like that is larger, you might sending around a lot of data without even being aware of. So always put your server actions into a separate file. Anything else will, cause trouble.
Some like to live dangerously.
Huh?
Some like to live dangerously.
Some like to live dangerously, yeah. But I will do a business in 2 years that is just crawling React server component sites and then blackmailing people, just to let you know. So you are on my list.
Okay, I think the easiest way to understand what is happening is I will show you what's going on the network. Yeah? So this is now the T2 app running in dev mode, so there's some more code running for the front, but you will see it still. So I say A1. Okay. The funny thing is Vacuum makes it very easy, so the name of the function is used as the call. So I'll show you the header. So it's just calling back to the server and calls this function. And what you can see here in the payload, it sends back the string we have just entered. And as a response, we just get, because I'm not sending any back in the function. I could send something back, but I don't do in this case. What I do is I just reload, and that's the reason why you see here the next line. The next line is now that what we have discussed in the beginning, this kind of React Server component serialization. This looks like a very strange format, but it's actually not. Every line is starting after the starting here is more or less JSON, just normal JSON. And what is in the beginning, it tells React where this stuff should be inserted in. And the reason why is this is a streaming format, and it allows React that some parts are sent back to the client, and other parts which are still not finished because you have them encapsulated with a suspense boundary are still getting processed to the server. So in our case, everything was there, it came quickly. But this list, what you see, could take 10 minutes and to be sent from the server to the client, and the site will still work. You will have parts of the site where maybe you have a spinner because or the element is not there, but other part of the site which work as expected. Or other parts of the site where there is content, but it has not been replaced with the newest values from the server.
I have a quick question. You mentioned before that one of the advantages of server components is to reduce the round trips, and they have this. I think the buzzword is single flight mutations, where you have a mutation that basically revalidates on the server and then runs the server component code, and then the mutation request itself basically already returns the RSC output. But here we're not seeing that, and also in the Next.js code I've seen that as the server action doesn't actually invalidate, we're going to a client component and then to the router and then invalidate it basically as another request. Is it because it's not possible in Vacuum? Because I think in Next.js it should be possible to.
In Vacuum it's not possible. Where in Next.js you have these kind of functions where you can reload a specific React component, React Server component, but Vacuum has not finished this part. That was quite complex because it's when you look at the code. This is the functions, because in here we have the add to do, and then we just store it. In my case, I can show you. This is my reduce. I'm using here the database, so this is not relevant. But after we've stored in the database, here we should have this kind of function you have in Next.js where you tell the router to only re-render a specific React component on the server and send it back, and that's not implemented. The protocol can do it, and the client can do it too. So this is like still part of the problem in the ecosystem. The only framework I know, but it's not React Server Component, is Solid, which has completely fixed is and does it with 0 round trips. Yeah. They support throwing, they support promises and everything in the thing. Because this is the one thing is you could do it the data return, but not the component content with the server side actions. That's where I send nothing. I could here write return and send back some data, but I would send some data back, and then I would have to have, as you used in the past with React client side, and have the data on the client side and just mutate on the client side the data coming back from the action. Yeah? That's always an option still with React Server Components. But the goal here is that what you ask for is to get away from this what we still have. Any questions to this server-side functions? Good. So in this case, I replaced the local. This was the original sample, and this is now using, as you see. But still, I know, has any one of you used Vite to compile a backend code? Okay. Okay, Vite has no idea about binaries, so you will, when you use something like SQLite, which needs a binary, will fail. So good luck, but it's not that hard. You just write your own plugin and check when it's looking for new things, then you copy it to the target directory. That's
all. Look, resource this.
46 lines?
Yeah, of course. Or at least make a blog post out.
Or just.
I bet there are people suffering from this. And they would love to have it.
It's in the Vaku. When you look there for SQLite support, you find this. So it's there. That's simple to do. What I want to show is now is a small shop, because we talked about SSG before, and we talked about why not use Astro as a site generation. Vaku supports that out of the box, not with this kind of content management. That's very cool, and I hope that someone makes this stuff independent of Astro available. So this is a shop. It's quite similar. It has a page, an index page where it lists the product search, and then it has a product page, and Vaku supports, similar to Astro or all the other frameworks, this kind of file system routing with the ID and the name. And what is cool with Vaku, at the end of each page you can define if the page gets rendered static or dynamic, and if it's a page like this with IDs. Similar we have seen with Astro too, is you need to define where are the IDs or what the content for the slugs. So when you have defined something like this, it can be ID and multiple more. So whatever could be there needs to be known to be pre-rendered. So the static bus is nothing else than you somewhere to get from a database the IDs, and then the stuff gets created.
Where are the products coming from?
In this case, I have here the data, and the products in this case is just changing this, but it could be, like you've seen before, a database, it could be a file system. I've done it with the file system, so I put something like Astro. It's no problem with Markdown files to read or not. Because the good thing is, with React Server Components, you can write normal node code and have file system access and everything. Let's look at this. How does this work? So, we got here in the distribution folder is in the public pages. I'll make it a little bit bigger. That's what got built, or what you show on the server. You see we have the about page is now as an index HTML available, completely rendered. We have the products. For each product we have the indexed HTML page rendered. So you have the site static. And the funny thing is, I only know Waco is offering this. You have also the, where's this? You have all the RSC content also statically, which makes it possible to deploy the site on a static server, still working like a React Server component page, but doesn't need anything on the backend. The only framework I know who has this kind of setup for the stuff. When we look now, starts it. You won't see that much on the front end.
Can Waco also do this? So you have 5 products at build time, and then you add a product, and then you request it, and it builds it during runtime and serves that?
Not out of the box, but it's not that hard to build. As I mean, this is I'm actually funny that Vienna and Next.js makes a huge thing out of it, but it has always been a possibility. In the moment you have something running on the server, it's no problem to build a page and throw it on S3 and then have a route in front which first looks if the page exists static, then take it. If not, build it. This is it's not existing out of the box, but with AWS, you have different ways to handle this. How you throw some scripts on the edge which capture the request and then has a list where it looks up. So this is the shop. You can search for the product. This is the client side. And when I click on, I clear here so we make it more visible. So let's load again. So what you see is, so we loaded the main page of the shop. This, when it loads the first time, it always loads the HTML. And so you have a complete SSR support, as expected. And when we now switch to another page, like this, the only thing which is got loaded is this. That's all what got loaded. Or, I have to be honest, in our case, the JavaScript for this page was already also loaded. If it has not been loaded before, it needs to be loaded too. So it could be that depending on the splitting. But currently, Waco doesn't split at all high-end logic. We just have everything so small that you don't have the problem that you have too many small pieces similar to big than the other way. But performance is fine. And when we now go back, for example, to the about page, you see there's only the about page. Serialization is loaded. So switching now between the pages. In my case, I have now disabled caching. So yeah, if the caching, this depends. If you have the server configured, for example, that it supports client-side caching, you even won't load from the server. In my case, now if everything is static as we have defined it currently, it would make sense to set a good client-side caching, or even with reverse proxy, and you have no load on the server at all. For switching between pages, you have to. That's Waco, and now let's switch. This is quite similar. So, what do you think is the smallest setup you can use to start with React Server components?
What do you mean?
Huh?
What do you mean?
What kind of, what do you need, what kind to be installed to start with React Server components?
Next.js too.
Let's show you React Server and the minimum. So all you need is one file, or something you copied from the internet for a React component which has no state, because that's the first file in each React server component frameworks needs to be a React server component. Let's start with this. And the rest you need is just use nbx or anbx, whatever you prefer. And let's switch to the right folder. So, and start it. That's all. Wait, I show you the terminal output.
Can you open node modules?
The node models. So I started. Let's make it real, because actually, you believe me, don't believe me if the node models folder is here. So I removed it before. So unless, so this has to be started again. So that's all I need to do. Good. That's all. So the idea behind this is not to start a project with this, but the idea is, if you plan to try out React Server components and don't want to install, I mean, it's still, everyone who knows NBX and so on, it still installs a lot of stuff somewhere else. Yeah? So it's not that it doesn't stretch your hard disk, but it's still, you have the feeling you don't have to install a lot of stuff.
Take that, asshole.
This is all like this. I was just commenting, like, at least he had the foresight to install PNPM. My hat goes off.
Okay.
To like answer the real question, right? Like, you can build a server component framework with React DOM, and like anything that can like respond to a network request.
I'm sorry, I don't get the questions.
Like the real answer to like what's the smallest possible server components framework is like, you need React, you need React DOM, and you need like render pipeable stream or like Express or whatever.
Now,
or could it be even smaller?
the problem is, this example was too small yet, because it wouldn't be a problem now to have already reading something on the local disk and having it shown there too. That's a nice thing. But you really get a feeling like you work with PHP, but it has nothing to do with how PHP works. Yeah? But that's the thing. In the background, yes, this library is using React DOM and all the stuff. Yeah? But the really crazy stuff you need to get React Server components working is three pipelines which have really a different configuration to bundle and transcribe the code you have. Yeah? So when the code needs to be compiled for the browser, that's the one thing. Yeah? The code needs to be compiled for SSR, re-rendering the page, and the third pipeline is to create this serialized output we have seen before. Yeah? And for the last one, there's this new context, new. The context has always been existed with React, but has not used that much. And when you bundle build the code for this the third step, which produces the serialized output, all the libraries get a different context. Yeah? And have to index. When you look in libraries, modern libraries, they have this kind of. I'm sure it's better to show you this. Prepared some links. Where's this? This is just an example.
Oh yeah.
So I think everyone has used this library indirectly. It's React text auto size, and when you look in the package JSON, then you will find that currently it gets more crazy. You have this long export statement, and the export statement defines what kind of code parts of your library work under which conditions. Yeah? And for RSCs, depends how complex your library is and what kind of stuff you use. With stuff I use, I mean, some APIs are only available on the browser, some APIs are only available on the node, some APIs are only available in Bun, some APIs are only available on some edge. Yeah? And this is, and React Server components are one different because they use another React DOM server. And this server has no context, has no state, and some libraries can handle SSR but fail in this context. That's what's coming now for with React Server components for the most libraries. So did I partly answer? Maybe switched. So it's not only React Server DOM and to get React Server components working. It's much more. That's why Waco and all the others struggling, and also Next.js took quite some time to get it right. It's not as easy. So this was it just to show you how minimal you can start. And when we look now in the shop variation here with React Server components. React Server component has allowed me to keep the structure nearly identical to Next.js with the app folder, but it is not something I would do because I'm not a fan to have the pages and the components in the same folder, because here I have then to switch the configuration. So it's only but it only takes pages which have the page in the name. Yeah? This is not necessary for React Server content. I could use anything as when I have the pages in its own folder. And I think that's also one of the reasons why currently, when I tested it out, my products the products. You see, it's similar. It's always the same. The code of the components are to 99% the same. The only difference, that's another problem currently React is, as the routers and the link, everything with routing is framework specific. So whenever you copy React Server components from one framework to another, you need to change everything which is related to routing, server side or client side. So the link component is always specific to the framework. The same is true when you look into the this is the good example components. Yeah, when you look into the product search, we have the it's not the product search. What I wanted to show is in Waco is when you need to change the router, need the router position, it's also something to use router. It's also something specific to the framework and on the function. That's it. Oh yeah, I don't have a server-side function here, I don't need it. So what this framework can do too is, let's open the terminal. So same thing here. There's a dev mode too, so it supports. Yeah, that's the nice thing. With React Server components, you have full stack debugging, client and server side in dev mode. Step debugging. You set the breakpoint and you debug from the front end to the back end, from the back end to the front end. This was possible already with other frameworks I've been using, like the WAC or framework, but this is something which comes because of the integration. So let's start it. This is too. This one. Okay, the images are broken because he's not copying the public folder, but I think it's not the problem. see here too is at the moment we go to a page is loading only the React server components, that's the same. And if we go back to the build folder, into the build folder, and look into the build folder that's here, you will see he created in the about folder index pages. In this case, he also creates the compression, and he even creates the also the static stuff. So this guy can do it too. And as you see, you get a couple of folders. That's the part you need for the client. That's the part which does everything on the server. And you see, you get with this framework also similar stuff like this Waku. Any questions?
Which one would you go for now?
Currently, I go for the React Server because this guy it took him, I have to say, it was amazing, 2 weeks to fix all the stuff related to Runtime not working, the UI framework. Yeah. And it's a lot of tweaking of white build pipeline to get the stuff. And now everything works except for the graph library, but it's the main reasons you need to use new beta version because again most libraries Runtime embeds another library and this library is not ready for React Server components. So that's the main reason you run into.
Are you using React Server components in production today? Yeah. No,
if I use it?
Yeah.
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, I would not use anything except Next.js, and I have no experience because the community is too small. Yeah, and I mean, you can use it for a hobby project, but for production with these frameworks, the one is 2 months old. The one I suggest, yeah. The other one is half a year, and they now have to switch to V6, so they will have to do some rework. Yeah. So.
But Next.js, would you use RC?
I mean, depends. When you come with a framework and you have to use it, for example, but the thing with Next.js is, I've seen it with Runtime. Next.js is just a force that as a bigger library you have to support it. So you get immediately the focus of the library owners to fix the stuff. They have Runtime has written something very specific which is only for Next.js to support it. Yeah. So that's a different. So, yeah. But still, I would even with Next.js, I would expect that things which are not mainstream libraries that they break with React Server components. That's based on the concept behind. It's not the fault of Next.js, but it doesn't help you if your whole project is to 80% finished on Next.js and you need to include a library which to rewrite takes too long. You will have to go through. But I think with Next.js, but I'm not an expert, you can mix app folder and non-app folder. I don't know if this helps in all situations, but this could be an escape.
But in any case, I mean, you can always fall back to a client component and then it would only render, it would render it server side.
With Waku it's still broke. I can't tell you. With Waku still broke after encapsulating it in a client component.
In a use client? Yes, because your use client component is still rendered on the server once.
Yeah.
But you can break out of this in Next.js, but it's really, you have to get dynamic import with some special stuff. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I did it once. Needed it.
My experience with the new frameworks that they even broke in other icons like SSR and stuff. So it works in a dev environment, it doesn't work with the build
Wow.
It works with the build, it doesn't work. The worst case, it works with build, so you could use it theoretical, but practical, if the dev environment doesn't work anymore, so how would you develop when the dev environment is broken? I think no one of us wants to go back to a world where you blind changes on your code and then you have to do the build and then you hopefully then you see what you've done. So just for the end. I think RS2 is still a useful for the modern web development, and I still think that even I'm not an experienced, there is no option beside Next.js currently for React server components. I don't see them. They are nice to learn a little bit about and to experiment, but there's no one with the resources behind compared to Next.js. And you could try them out to learn. You could try them for some projects, but you keep in mind that there are more things broken than with Next.js. And I also still think that the ecosystem is not ready for this.
Do you have the same problems with Remix?
This one?
With Remix?
No.
Okay.
No.
But if they are rendering on the server, you must have the same issue as well.
No, I mean, as you said, like they are not using React server components yet.
Yeah.
Because they started to render React in a certain way earlier than the Next.js was doing it.
Yeah.
So you have full V6 support with client and server splitting, so you don't have to do this when you want to use Prisma, for instance, or any other Drizzle or whatever database executor. You don't have to. So that is already solved, and also you don't have to do this use client, use server.
Yeah.
So the splitting is done, and there are none of these issues, at least not to that extent.
Yeah.
You have full type safety between the loaders and the components, and you often don't even realize when something is on the client or on the server, because that's what the framework has to do. So,
I mean, the big step is V6 for fixing a lot of stuff, also the debugging and the TypeScript, because the bundling of the server part was a problem with the old version of Vite. This was more like a hack, because you had then multiple workers running with different versions of Vite to handle these different pipelines, and that's with different compiling configurations.
Yeah.
And now Vite has come up with this. I can show you. This looks like this currently. That's V6. So in Vite you can have an unlimited number of build pipelines which run parallel. That's what you also need in dev mode. It's less important but yeah. So in a Vite configuration you can have here now multiple definitions of what kind of plugins, what kind of configurations. Yeah? And this was not existing before, so it was somehow you had to have it in, or you wrapped something where Vite was then a subpart of. So you wrote your own wrapper around Vite and used parts of Vite to get that, and that's not needed now with V6. So that's something which is the biggest change in V6, which is not relevant for most users, but was a big, huge improvement for all the frameworks, specifically Remix. For Remix, it was also independent of switching to RLC. Is this one of the most important changes? But everyone can use it. So if you have the situation that you need to do different independent steps as part of the build, you can define them now in the Vite config. Thank you for listening to this long talk. I hope that if I